The sun was still soft through the kitchen window when the call came. I had just folded the last of the towels, still warm and faintly scented with lavender, when the screen lit up with Caroline's name. My daughter-in-law rarely called unless she wanted something. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself. "Hi, Margaret," she said briskly. "Daniel and I were wondering if you could take Sophie this weekend. We've got that leadership retreat up in Asheville. His mom can't, and you're usually so great about this stuff." I steadied my voice. "Caroline, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. Just a checkup, but I'm still recovering from the knee procedure. I don't think I can manage a full weekend with a 6-year-old right now." There was a pause, clipped and sharp. "Oh," she said finally. "I see." I waited, but the silence stretched brittle as glass. Then her voice cooled. "Something's shifting, I guess. You're just not being very supportive of the family." Her words stung, but I kept my tone even. "I'm not saying I don't want to help. I'm saying I physically can't right now." Another pause, longer this time. "Right," she said, icy. "Well, we'll figure something out." The call ended before I could respond. I stood still for a long time, the phone heavy in my hand, the scent of laundry clinging in the air. Later that evening, I made tea. I never drank and sat by the window as dusk rolled in. My knee throbbed, a reminder that I had pushed too hard at physical therapy. But the ache in my chest was worse. At 9 o'clock, the phone buzzed again. A message short and merciless. "Please don't come by the house anymore. It's time for boundaries. We've changed the locks." I read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They didn't. I set the phone down, tracing the chipped edge of the mug in my hand like a nervous tick. Outside, the porch light across the street flickered on. A pair of teenagers biked past, laughter ringing in the warm night. I wondered if they knew how quickly warmth could vanish. The next morning, I drove to the house I had helped Daniel and Caroline buy. Pale brick, 2 stories, a deep green front porch we'd painted together one summer, when Caroline was pregnant with Sophie. At the time, she'd called it the color of permanence. Now, it looked foreign. I parked across the street and studied the stroller folded neatly by the porch swing, one of Sophie's tiny sneakers lying forgotten beneath it. I walked slowly up the steps, my knee catching on the 3rd riser, and rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. From inside came the faint shuffle of footsteps, then silence. I reached into my bag and pulled out the key with the red sticker, the one I had carried for years. I turned it in the lock. It caught, then stopped. I tried again. Nothing. It wasn't jammed. It was simply no longer meant for me. I stood there for a long moment, hand on the knob, listening to the wind stir the hem of my skirt. Finally, I let the key fall back into my bag and stepped away. The walk back to the car felt longer than 20 feet. I sat behind the wheel, not crying, not raging, but laughing softly, brokenly. A door I had opened for years now treated me like a stranger. That night, I moved through my own house like a guest. I turned off lights I hadn't turned on, wiped counters that were already clean. The silence pressed in until I could barely breathe. Finally, I pulled out the old file box from the closet and carried it to the kitchen table. Inside was a worn yellow folder marked Family. I opened it. The first slip, a bank transfer of $12,000 to Daniel and Caroline's escrow account, the down payment for their house. The next $4,300 for emergency surgery when Sophie was a baby and their insurance had lapsed. Tuition checks for Montessori school grocery stipends, car repairs, winter coats, birthday cakes. All of it written in my neat librarian's hand, labeled with notes like, "just until they're stable" or "just for now." I hadn't saved them out of resentment. I had saved them because I was a keeper of records. But tonight, the papers felt heavier. They weren't numbers anymore. They were footprints of a lifetime, walking behind the people I loved. The phone lay on the table beside the stack. For years, I had been the one to answer every call, every need, every emergency. But now, staring at those pages, I felt something small and certain begin to shift. I reached for my old address book, found the name tucked between the dentist and the vet. Peter Grant, my lawyer from years ago, the man who had helped me after my husband died. He had always spoken to me like I was a person, not just a widow. My hands trembled as I dialed. Rivers and McKinley, this is Abby. A receptionist chirped. Hello, dear. This is Margaret Hale. I was a client of Mr. Grant's some years ago. I'd like to schedule an appointment at his earliest convenience. A pause, then the sound of typing. Yes, of course, Mrs. Hale. He's available Tuesday at 10. Perfect, I said. When I hung up, I sat very still. Something had ended tonight, and something else had just begun. Peter greeted me in the waiting room with the same steady expression he had worn years ago when he handled my husband's estate. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded, led me into his office, and waited. The leather chair creaked softly as I sat clutching the list I had written in the quiet of my kitchen. I need to make a few changes, I said. Of course, he replied. Just tell me where to begin. I unfolded the paper, the words pressed deep into the lines from how hard I had written them. First, I want to revoke the power of attorney I granted to my daughter-in-law, Caroline. Peter blinked, then nodded once. All right. And I want to update my will. I want everything my home account's assets placed in trust for my niece, Emma Rhodes. She lives in Oregon. She's been good to me not because she has to, but because she wants to. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he didn't challenge me. We can arrange all of that today. Would you like to remove Daniel and Caroline entirely? Yes, I said quietly. They have enough. He took notes while I sat with my hands folded in my lap. When he slid the revocation papers across the desk, I signed without hesitation. Each stroke of the pen felt like a cord being cut one tie after another, releasing me. From there, I drove straight to the bank. The branch manager, a woman named Quinn, greeted me crisply. I explained what I needed. I want to cancel all recurring transfers to my son's household. Permanently. Her eyebrows rose. That includes mortgage support, tuition payments, car insurance, and a grocery stipend. May I ask the reason? Because support should not come at the cost of dignity, I replied. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. We'll take care of it. One more thing, I added. I'd like a full printout of every transaction I've made to their household in the past 10 years. Her brows rose higher. 10 years? Yes. She left to process the request, and I sat in the quiet office, hands folded again, listening to the steady tick of the clock. When she returned, she handed me a thick folder. The pages were heavy in my hands. Back home, I spread them across the dining table. Lines of numbers stretched across the paper: 300 for groceries, 200 for tuition, 800 for car repairs, 500 for braces, 3,000 for furnace repair. My handwriting appeared in the memo's phrases like, just until they're stable or just for now. I circled each entry in red. Not out of bitterness, but to remember. Not out of revenge, but to honor the truth. By the time I set the pen down, the sun had dipped low, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. The first call came 2 days later. I let it ring twice before answering. It was Daniel. His voice was tight, forced polite. Hi, Mom. Everything okay? We noticed the mortgage transfer didn't come through this week. It wasn't a glitch, I said evenly. A pause. And the grocery deposit, Caroline thought maybe. It wasn't a glitch, I repeated. He exhaled sharply. Did something happen? She changed the locks on me, Daniel. After one no. Silence. I could hear him shifting on the line, trying to find the right words. Look, we're under a lot of pressure. The retreat was important. Caroline, I had a doctor's appointment. I cut in. He didn't respond. I've made some changes, I said. To my accounts. To my will. You'll no longer receive support from me. Is this really necessary? he asked. No, I said softly, but it's overdue. I ended the call before he could respond. An hour later, Caroline called. I let the first one go to voicemail, but when she called again, I picked up. I don't know what point you think you're making, Margaret, she said sharply. But this is not how families work. I stayed quiet. You're breaking the family. No, I said. I just stopped being its unpaid backbone. She gave a bitter laugh. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Caroline? Silence. I didn't wait. I hung up. That night, the house felt different. Not empty, but clean, like a room aired out after years of staleness. I made tea, not out of habit, but because I wanted it and drank it while it was still warm. Just after 10, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I pressed play. Hi, Grandma. It's me, Sophie. Mommy's been crying and Daddy's mad and I don't really get it, but I miss you. I miss your house. I miss your stories. Can I come over sometime? Even if Mommy says no? Her voice cracked at the end. My hand tightened around the phone. I didn't call back, not yet, but I saved the message and wrote her name on a small notepad beside the phone, as if anchoring her to me in ink. The next day, I packed an overnight bag and took the train north to visit Emma. She met me at the small coastal station with open arms and a quiet smile. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come on, I made scones." Her home sat just above the shoreline, close enough to hear the waves, but tucked behind tall grass. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and laundry. Her old tabby cat Jasper followed me like he remembered me from years ago. We spent the first afternoon baking peach cobbler and talking about books, neighbors, and time slipping too quickly. That night, she poured me a glass of wine and handed me a small box. Inside was a brass key on a blue ribbon. For the front door, she said, in case you ever want to come back or never leave. I didn't answer at first. I just ran my thumb over the smooth metal and nodded. It wasn't pity. It was permission. Later, I sat on her porch with a blanket across my lap, the sound of waves in the distance. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was Sophie again. Hi, Grandma. Mommy says you're on a trip. I hope it's a good one. I made a picture for you, but I don't know where to send it. I read it twice, then typed back. Hi, sweetheart. I miss you too. I'm by the ocean. It's loud and beautiful. There's a cat here who reminds me of our gingerbread stories. You can always send me pictures. I'll keep them forever. Her reply came almost instantly. Yay! I smiled, set the phone down, and closed my eyes. The brass key lay on the table between Emma and me, catching the porch light. I didn't pick it up again that night, but I knew exactly where it was. When I returned home a week later, the house was exactly as I had left it, quiet, still carrying no expectation. I unpacked slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to touch each thing again. My garden had grown wild while I was away. The rosemary sprawled across the walkway, and the lavender bent heavy with bloom. I knelt carefully, trimmed it back, and breathed in the sharp fragrance as the sun warmed my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt like the home was mine again, not just a backdrop to someone else's needs. The knock came just as I was gathering the clippings into a basket. It was soft, uncertain. I brushed the dirt from my knees, wiped my hands, and opened the door. Sophie stood there, her backpack slipping from one shoulder, clutching a folded paper in her hands. Her wide eyes searched mine, nervous but hopeful. Mommy dropped me off, she whispered. She said I could stay the weekend, if it's okay with you. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside. She kicked off her sneakers, dropped her backpack with a thud, and ran straight to the fridge. She laughed when she saw the postcard from the ocean still pinned beneath the donut magnet. You kept it, she said. Of course I did. Later, we curled up on the couch with the old green blanket. She rested against me like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I read her favorite story about the fox in the moonlight. She whispered the last line before I reached it. Home is where someone waits for you. I kissed the top of her head and closed my eyes. For that weekend, the house felt alive again. When Daniel came to pick her up Sunday evening, he lingered on the porch, shifting uncomfortably. His voice was softer than it had been in months. "She missed you." "I missed her too," I said evenly. He scratched at his jaw. "Caroline, she thinks you're trying to turn Sophie against us." I raised an eyebrow. "Children don't turn against love, Daniel. They recognize where it lives." He had no response. He just nodded once and walked her to the car. The next weeks were quiet, though not empty. Sophie called when she could, whispering from under her blanket at night, asking about my garden or the cat she had seen at Emma's. Caroline never called again, though I saw the occasional pointed post online veiled words about loyalty and betrayal, about how families should stick together. I didn't engage. I had no need to. One Thursday afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from Daniel or Caroline, it was from the bank. A formal notice that the Merit mortgage was 3 months overdue. I sat at the kitchen table, letter trembling slightly in my hand. 10 years of quiet support had kept them afloat, and in barely 3 months without it, the cracks were already widening. A pang of guilt threatened to rise, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't my burden anymore. That night, I spoke with Emma on the phone. I told her about the letter, the silence, the guilt that still clung like a shadow. She listened quietly before saying, "Margaret people can drown in shallow water if they refuse to swim. You were their life raft for too long. It's not your fault they never learned." Her words stayed with me. The following Sunday, Sophie came again. This time, she arrived with a small duffel bag and a shy smile. "Mommy says I can stay every other weekend now," she said. I didn't ask what had changed. I only opened the door wider. We cooked together that evening, her tiny hands rolling dough clumsily for biscuits. She chattered about school, about her best friend Mia, about a drawing contest she wanted to enter. Later, she curled on the rug with her crayons sketching while I folded laundry. She held up her picture proudly. It was of a house with a garden smoke curling from the chimney and 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small. "That's you and me," she said. My throat tightened. I taped it to the fridge beside the postcard. Life took on a rhythm after that. Not easy, not simple, but steady. Sophie became a regular presence, filling the house with questions and laughter. Emma visited, often bringing books or jars of jam, reminding me that family could be chosen, not just inherited. The lavender grew back fuller than ever, the rosemary flourished, and in the evenings I sat on the porch with tea that I finally drank while it was still warm. But the peace was tested one afternoon in late autumn. I was raking leaves when Caroline pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, her expression taut, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. "We need to talk," she said. I leaned on the rake, waiting. "You've poisoned Daniel against me. Against us. Sophie comes home singing about your garden, your stories, your food. She doesn't listen to me anymore." I shook my head slowly. "I haven't poisoned anyone, Caroline. I've just loved her." Her eyes flashed. "You think you're the hero in all this, don't you? But you're not. You're just a lonely old woman clinging to a child who doesn't belong to you." The words stung, but I steadied myself. "She belongs to herself, Caroline, and she'll choose where she feels safe." Caroline's lips tightened, but she had no retort. She turned, sharply marched back to her car, and drove away, gravel spitting beneath her tires. I stood for a long while, rake in hand, the cold air biting at my cheeks. For years, I had accepted silence, dismissal, exile, but not anymore. This time, the door would remain open, not for Caroline's approval, but for Sophie's laughter, for Emma's kindness, for my own dignity. Winter crept in quietly, frosting the garden with silver and pressing long nights against the windows. I had grown used to the solitude, but now it didn't feel heavy. Sophie's shoes by the door, her drawings taped to the fridge, even her forgotten hair clips scattered across the couch cushions. These little traces of her, filled the house with warmth. She came every other weekend, sometimes with Daniel dropping her off in silence, sometimes with just a quick wave from the car. Caroline never accompanied her again. One evening, after Sophie had gone back home, I sat at the dining table with the thick folder of records I'd requested from the bank months ago. Page after page, the proof of what I had poured into Daniel's household stared back at me. It wasn't bitterness I felt now. It was clarity. Each line was not a burden, but a testament I had loved, I had given, I had held up more than my share. I could finally see it not as wasted, but as lived. And now I was free to close the account not only at the bank, but in my heart. The following weekend, Sophie bounded through the door with a school project tucked under her arm. "It's a family tree," she explained breathlessly, pulling out the colorful chart. She had written my name in large letters beneath hers, with little hearts drawn around it. Daniel's name was there too, smaller off to the side. Caroline's name was written, but faint, as if Sophie's pencil had hesitated. "My teacher said families are who raise you, not just who you're born to," she said matter-of-factly. I blinked back tears and kissed the top of her head. "That's very wise of your teacher." Daniel came for her that Sunday evening, but instead of just a nod, he lingered on the porch. His face looked drawn, his shoulders heavy. "Mom," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." I studied him, unsure what to believe. He sighed. "I let Caroline push me. I let her shape the way things went. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. And now things are falling apart. We're behind on the mortgage. The bills." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix it." For a moment, the old instinct surged in me, the one that wanted to reach for my checkbook to step in to rescue. But I held still. "Daniel," I said softly, "you're an adult. You and Caroline built your home. You'll have to decide how to rebuild it. I can't do that for you anymore." He looked at me, something breaking behind his eyes. But he nodded, as if he had known that would be my answer. He turned and walked back to the car, leaving me in the doorway with the sound of gravel crunching under his tires. That night, I sat by the fire with Sophie's family tree propped on the mantel. The branches she had drawn stretched wide and colorful hearts scattered among the names. For the first time, I realized that perhaps my place in her life was not something that could be taken by locks or changed phone numbers. It lived in her heart, unshakable. Weeks passed. The cold softened. Snow melted into the soil, and tiny green shoots pushed their way through the frost. Spring carried renewal with it. Emma visited often, bringing seedlings for the garden, laughing that my lavender was threatening to take over the whole yard. Sophie helped us plant tomatoes one sunny afternoon, her small fingers patting the soil with care. She looked up at me with a grin. "This will be our garden," she said. "Yes," I whispered. "Ours." The letter from Caroline came in April, handwritten tight and angry. She accused me of manipulation, of overstepping, of ruining her marriage. At the bottom, she scrawled, "You'll regret what you've done." I folded the letter, once slid it into the back of the folder with all the bank records, and closed it. For once, I felt no sting. The threat was hollow. My regret would have been staying silent, continuing to give without acknowledgement, allowing myself to be erased. But I had chosen differently. By summer, Daniel and Caroline's house went on the market. I saw the sign one morning while driving Sophie back after a weekend. She stared at it in silence, her small hand clutching mine from the passenger seat. "Will we still see each other?" she asked quietly. "Always," I promised. "No matter what changes, you'll always have a place with me." That evening, when I returned home alone, I sat on the porch with a glass of tea. The garden hummed with crickets, the sky deepening into violet. I thought of all the years I had given, all the nights I had stayed quiet, all the sacrifices made in the name of family. And now, sitting in the fading light, I realized something simple. Family wasn't measured in debts or demands. It was measured in love freely given and freely received. The locks had been changed once, but the key that mattered was already in my hands. Autumn came early that year, with crisp mornings that smelled of wood smoke and apples. The trees turned gold, then fire red, and Sophie ran through the yard, gathering leaves in her arms like treasures. She had grown taller, her laugh louder, but when she curled up beside me on the couch, she was still the little girl who once tugged at my sleeve and asked if I could tell her a story before bed. Daniel came less often now. His calls were shorter, his voice wearier, but there was a shift in him. The anger, the defensiveness, even the excuses seemed to fade. Once he called just to say Sophie had gotten an award at school and he thought I should be the first to know. It wasn't reconciliation, not really, but it was something softer than before. Caroline, on the other hand, vanished. No calls, no visits, no notes. I only heard whispers from neighbors and a clipped comment from Sophie that Mommy moved somewhere else. There was no celebration in that, only a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable. You can only build walls so high before they fall under their own weight. Life found a rhythm again. I baked bread on Saturdays, tended the garden on Sundays, and in the evenings, Emma and I would sit with tea, laughing about small things, reminiscing about the days when we were girls playing barefoot in the same backyard. I found myself smiling, more laughing easily, breathing without that knot of fear in my chest. Then, one afternoon, Sophie brought home a school assignment. We had to write about our hero, she explained, sliding the paper across the table. In big, uneven handwriting, she had written, "My hero is Grandma Margaret. She never gives up even when people are mean. She makes me feel safe and loved, and she always tells me stories that make me brave." I pressed the paper to my chest, my eyes stinging. For all the years I had been treated like a burden, dismissed or used. Here was the truth in a child's words. I had mattered. I did matter. Weeks later, Daniel showed up on my porch alone. His eyes looked tired, but clearer than I had ever seen them. "Mom," he said, voice low, "thank you for not giving up on Sophie. I know I failed you in a lot of ways. I'm still trying to figure things out." I nodded, my heart soft but steady. "We all figure things out, Daniel. The important part is not pretending we don't need to." He swallowed hard, then hugged me. It was awkward at first, but then he held on like he hadn't since he was a boy. I didn't cry. I didn't scold. I just let the moment be what it was, a fragile step forward. By winter, the house no longer felt empty. Sophie's drawings decorated the fridge. Emma's laughter echoed in the hall, and Jasper, the old tabby Emma had given me, curled on my lap every evening. There was peace here, not loud or triumphant, but steady and real. One snowy night, Sophie looked up from her hot cocoa and asked Grandma, "Are we home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "We're home." I had once believed that love meant giving until I disappeared, sacrificing until nothing of me remained. But standing in that quiet kitchen with the warmth of family surrounding me, I finally understood the truth. Love is not measured by what we lose of ourselves, but by what we share, without fear, without condition, without demand. The locks they changed had never really barred me. I had carried the key all along. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it touched you, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear it. And tell me in the comments, what does family mean to you? And where have you found your true home?